Probably about 70 to 80% of athletes are going through some type of mental health struggle. I tell people this all the time. No matter how much money you make, what your status in society, you are not immune to what life can throw at you.
My mental health is surely more important, and I can't be the very best football player I could be unless my mental health is intact.
We've all been taught that the game is 90% mental and 10% physical. If that is true, how much are we investing into this 90%?
Welcome to Hope Starts With Us, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. My name is Dan Gillison. I'm the CEO for NAMI. We believe that hope starts with all of us, and that's why we started this podcast. And I want to tell you 5 things real quick. Hope starts with us talking about mental health. Hope starts with us making information accessible. Hope starts with us providing resources and practical advice. Hope starts with us sharing our stories. And finally, hope starts with us breaking the stigma. If you or a loved one is struggling with a mental health condition and have been looking for hope, we made this podcast for you. Hope starts with all of us. Hope is a collective. We hope that each episode, with each conversation, brings you into that collective to know you are not alone. Today, I'm joined by former NFL players Marcus Smith and Sol Cole and Zach Moore to talk about athlete mental health. Now, I'm going to read their bios to you because they've earned their portfolios and their backgrounds. But before I do that, let me give you a little bit about why this conversation is so critically important. Over the last few years, people have begun opening up about their mental health in the public sphere like never before, including athletes like Naomi Osaka and Simone Biles, who drew global headlines when they found themselves needing to withdraw from events like the French Open and the Tokyo Olympics in order to protect their mental well-being. In an environment where physical and mental toughness is glorified and there is immense pressure to perform, many athletes can become at risk for mental health conditions like anxiety or depression. And many can feel like reaching out for help or taking a break may be perceived as weakness. For athletes of color, having to navigate racism within the field and daily life only adds to the many stresses faced by all. Marcus, Sol, Zach, we can't thank you enough. And before I really get into this, I want to go back and share with our audience your bios. It's critically important. So let me start with Marcus Smith II. Marcus Smith II is a professional athlete, philanthropist, entrepreneur, and guest speaker dedicated to ending the stigma surrounding mental health, especially in professional sports. In addition to once playing in the NFL, he creates opportunities for single mothers and their children through his foundation, M2, and seeks to improve the world through the written and spoken word. A Georgia native, Marcus battled anxiety and depression from an early age. He struggled with these unwanted yet ever-present companions well into adulthood and even contemplated taking his own life. Nevertheless, he overcame all odds to become one of the best football players in the world. Marcus played quarterback at Hardaway High School in Columbus, Georgia, before switching to linebacker at the University of Louisville. I believe that's the Cardinals. In 2013, he led the nation in sacks with an average of 14.5, or that year, 14.5, and was named ACC Defensive Player of the Year and a third-team All-American. A first-round NFL draft pick in 2014, he went on to play for the Philadelphia Eagles, Seattle Seahawks, and who was known then as the Washington Redskins, now known as the Commanders. Marcus has touched countless lives along his football journey. His faith always at the forefront of his life, he is committed to helping others overcome their mental health struggles and believes his story can inspire them to get the help they need. Marcus has a bachelor's degree in communications, which prepared him for life after football. He lives in Waldorf, Maryland, with his wife, Allison, and their daughter, Sherry. Now, Sol Cole. Sol is a former NFL wide receiver. He played college football at Rutgers and signed with the New Orleans Saints in the 2014 NFL Draft. He caught his first career touchdown on a 12-yard pass from Drew Brees in the second quarter. Sol Cole began meditating during his rehab process after playing in an NFL. He says mindfulness became an outlet for healing from the mental and emotional trauma of life as a professional ball player. He is now a wellness consultant, mindfulness speaker, and workshop facilitator, as well as a certified breath coach and sound healing practitioner. In his spare time, he loves poetry and painting. He also has a secret talent of tap dancing. And you know, we all need that navigating this thing called life. Now I'd like to introduce to you our final guest, Zach Moore, a former NFL defensive end. Zach was drafted by the New England Patriots in the 2014 NFL draft. He played college ball at Concordia University. After his time playing football, he explains that he went through an identity crisis and gained a lot of weight, but was eventually able to find help at a mental health facility where he was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, chronic pain syndrome, generalized anxiety, and major depressive disorder. He is now a certified trainer on a mission to help other men to live physically and mentally healthy lives. Moore is originally from the Windy City of Chicago and is a father of 2 girls. In his spare time, he enjoys yoga, boxing, and other forms of physical activity that help him maintain his mental health and connections with others. Marcus, Sol, Zach, we can't thank you enough for taking time to be here with us today to share your insights, wisdom, and experiences with us. And at such an appropriate time, when this episode airs, I will actually be in Phoenix at Radio Row talking to people about athlete wellness, and we will be just a few days away from the Super Bowl. So we're so excited that you're here. Thank you for giving us your time and the grace of sharing with us. So we have so much to ask you, and you know, I'll start out by just talking about what we've seen with Damar Hamlin, because it really raised a lot of things with that. We were very encouraged to see the NFL taking the mental health of players, coaches, and staff seriously when they postponed games and distributed mental health support resources for teams when everything happened with Damar Hamlin. We also reached out to make sure they knew that NAMI had resources here for anyone needing help and support. Let me ask you, how did this incident, as you saw it, learned about it, affect each of you when you watched it? And so that's one question. How do you think it's continuing to impact the mental health of the NFL overall community?
Oh, I guess I'll start off. When I actually seen it, it was something that I had never seen before. I was always a big mental health advocate. I always was a person who was always for the players. And then as you're watching the game, it did something to me that, you know, hadn't been done to me. You know, I actually cried about it. I was in my room with my wife, and, you know, it just had me in a state of feeling sad, depressed, just seeing that brother go through that, and knowing that the teams, both teams, you could see it in their faces. You could see all of it. Like, they didn't know what to do either, because you're giving, you know, live CPR on national television. So it was a hard thing to actually see for us to actually go through. But I was definitely happy that the NFL postponed the game and they actually started taking the mental health really, really serious, because that's what trauma looks like for us. You know, we don't even realize that when a teammate gets hurt or something happens, we have to move the ball up and keep moving. We haven't even had time to process what is happening on the field. And so for them to actually take a step and go further and reach out to you guys and just to be present with all the NFL players, that was commendable, and that was great for them to do. But I think also for your second question, I believe that they are going in the right direction, and that it's a true impact for people actually, because mental health does not have a name. It doesn't have a name. We all know that anyone could suffer from anxiety, depression, all these different things. And me, as being a life coach, I continue to create this bridge to kind of like help people get the help that they solely desire. So, man, through the NFL and everything that they're doing, I think is tremendous. And I am praying that it continues to go further because, people's mental health is the most important, I believe.
Thank you, Marcus. And that's so well put. And that's why this conversation is so important. Thank you. So what was your impression and what do you think of what the NFL is doing now?
Honestly, for me, people ask me about, my reaction to the situation. And I was grateful that I actually fell asleep during the game. So I didn't see it happen live. I woke up the next morning and saw all the alerts on my phone, saw, people talking about it on social media. And in that moment, I was grateful that I did not witness it live. And I took that as a sign that God knew that would have been too much for my heart to handle at that time to actually witness it. I still haven't even gone back to watch it. I don't need to watch it. I saw everything I needed to see, what Marcus alluded to with the players' faces and their reaction, the coaches, his family. I saw everything I needed to see through them, that I did not need to go and put myself in a situation to just watch it on the replay. And so for that, I've said, wow, that was so impactful, and I'm still so affected by it. I can only imagine if I had witnessed it live. I'm pretty sure I would have been brought to tears the same way Marcus said. And to see the NFL take that initiative and postpone the game and put their players' mental health first, their emotional health first, was truly encouraging, because that was the whole world was watching. The whole world was watching on how they were going to respond and put their mental health on as a priority. And I was encouraged to be a part of, a brotherhood that stands for that. And I think they are moving in the right direction and taking the necessary steps moving forward. So I am grateful for that, and just want to continue to encourage, Damar and his recovery and his family as well, just because that was truly an impactful moment for our league, our brand.
With Damar being an athlete like you guys, playing since sandlot ball all the way up through high school and then college, and then actually being one of those 3 to 4% to make it to the NFL like you guys, what does Damar have to do now that he's in a different place, because his identity has been tied to football, but more importantly to his community of his brothers that he plays ball with? What does he have to do to take care of himself from the neck up as he navigates his physical piece and his identity?
I'll chime in on this one first, because for me it hits home a little different, because the reason why I retired was because I had neck surgery on C4 and C5, and that put everything in perspective for me in terms of whether I was going to return to the game or not. And I really contemplated that. Because my mind was so strong beforehand and my will was so determined, that I believed that I could actually come back from that injury. I believed that, and I told myself that I was actually going to be comeback player of the year. That's how strong my mind is. And then I was directing that energy in that way. And then I had to take a step back and realize that, I actually saw someone get paralyzed from the neck down in college. And Eric LeGrand, I was a freshman when that happened, and I remember the traumatic feeling that impacted me and still holds on me to this day. And I realized that I was one step closer to that if I decided to go back. And I can't speak for Damar, but I can say if he ever hears this message, my brother, I really pray that you understand that there's so much more life ahead of you than this game that you invested in and sacrificed for to this point. You're so much more life ahead of you, and there's so many people who love you just for you and not what you can do, right? And so, with that identity crisis that that you may or may not be going through right now, I pray that you lean into your support system, your inner circle. Know that your brothers, here extended are with you in support, in arms, however we can. And know that there are ample amount of resources that NAMI can provide for you as well. And that's what I would like to say.
Thank you. And so thank you for the decision you made in terms of the C4, C5. And I know it was hard, but thank you, because we have the blessing of you for the rest of your life and the rest of our lives. And I know that was a hard decision. And I just want to say, thank you for making that very hard decision. I appreciate it. Marcus, any thoughts that you have in terms of Damar and how does he evolve and how can we help him with that?
Definitely. I believe that even with my own experience, kind of like how so-called 2017, right? I walk away from the game. I had a run-in with suicide twice, and I walked away from it. I had no choice at this time but to get therapy, to actually talk to someone who was unbiased to help me navigate my anxiety and my depression. And my thought process through this was to figure out a way, even though I walked away, even though this was the game that I loved, something clicked in me after that day happened that, okay, my mental health is surely more important. And I can't be the very best football player I could be unless my mental health is intact. And so what I started to do, I started to actually go on this journey of healing, the healing process that, Soul Cole always talk about, right? The healing process, I started to go on this journey. And eventually, as I started to get better, I went back to the game. And then I actually got tested the same way, but I was actually able to use those tools that I had learned to put that to test. And I was actually able to finish out my career, go back and go play one more year. And then after that, I started to do the work in the mental health space and life coaching to help people. So I would just tell Damar, like, hey, man, even though this happened to you, just because it happened to you doesn't mean this has to be, this lifestyle has to be for you. You can come out of this. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is a place that you can get where there is, no way that one situation can hold you back. So I would always encourage, do what you have to do. There's always resources with you guys, NAMI, Sage Elite. That's who me and Soul Cole are working with now. I have a foundation now, which is the Circle of Ben. There is always things that can help you push forward and kind of get through that traumatic experience, because nobody really talked about the traumatic experience that was with him personally, right? Something like that happening to him and his thought process of actually getting back on the field and feeling like, okay, that was like a normal play and a normal hit. It's a process for you to get the confidence back to be able to play again. So I would just tell him, man, hey, man, just stay the course, build your confidence back, let it grow over time. And then, hey, if you want to go back out there and you feel comfortable with going back out there, then, that's what you do. But if you don't, then know that you're more than an athlete. You're more than a conqueror. God is going to have your back, and you have people who are supporting you.
Thank you for that message. Oh, go ahead, Soul.
I would like to just add this one part as you were talking, Marcus, just came up for me, is valuing your peace of mind and not allowing the pressure of any NFL team, any agent, any outside noise to pressure you to feel like you have to go back and do this. If that's something in your heart and your spirit that you feel that you're being called to do it at your time. Peace of mind is something that you should never compromise. And know your worth, my brother. You are worthy.
There you go. Thank you, Soul. Thank you, Marcus. One of the things I tell my son is that sometimes in life, son, it takes a stronger man to say no than it does to say yes. And peer pressure as Soul, you brought that up. Peer pressure can make you make decisions that you look back and say, I didn't do that for me. I did that because of the peer pressure. So this is for all the Damars out there, and we don't want to minimize what happened to him, but we want to use this moment to help others, and including Damar, from the standpoint of it's what you do, it's not who you are. If anyone is listening to this, hear what these athletes have shared and these men have shared regarding Damar and regarding this moment in time, because there's others out there that are at that inflection point of having to make decisions and make them understanding your whole self versus a moment in time and something that peer pressure can make you do. So thank you for that. Each of you is very accomplished. And I tried to play your sport and I couldn't navigate it. Wasn't big enough, wasn't strong enough. I definitely had the discipline and the regimentation, but my hat is off to you, because it takes so much fortitude, so much perseverance, and so much focus. And each of you have spoken very openly about your own journey with mental health struggles over the years. Can you share with our audience a little bit more about what unique challenges athletes can find themselves tackling in this profession? When you first realized you were struggling and how you eventually found support for your mental health, you're so focused on everything from the neck down that all of a sudden sometimes you look up and say, well, wait a minute, this thing above my neck is impacting what's happening from the neck down. So could you all share and just wrap and talk about your challenges, your journey, and finding support?
Well, I can attest to this, because actually, So Cold, we kind of like been talking, and we talked before, and he had said something key one time, and he was saying we always do everything in reverse. Like, we always put the mental at the back, and then you have the physical coming first, but we don't realize everything comes from here. Right? This has to be intact before you could do anything. If you don't have this, then how can your limbs work in the way that they should, or your arms work in the way that they should? And, for me, I always did it backwards. So even growing up, me going through anxiety, I had anxiety attacks all the time when I was younger. But did my family know that that's what it was? Because in the communities that we come from, that's not something that we always talked about. Right? And so think about you traveling with that, your whole life, and it never leaves you. We just think it does. We just put it into the back of our heads, and it just sits there. And we haven't had an opportunity to actually push it out our mouths and free ourselves. So that was always with me. And so over time, I get to the NFL. It's the same thing. I'm going through the same thing, but now being older, I never really felt like I could get rid of it, because I never did any work on myself. I was always pushing through, because, they tell men, like, you just need to suck it up. You keep going. And so I've always had that mentality, like, oh man, I'm gonna be all right. But eventually that anxiety turned into depression. And so now I'm in a depressed state, and my coaches, everybody is like, you all right? And I'm like, I'm good. And, I can't sleep at night. These anxiety attacks are happening in my sleep. My chest feel like it's caving in. And I just truly feel like at this point in time, like I have nowhere to go except for to end my life. Like I just felt like that was the only thing that was going to end the pain. That's all I wanted to do. The pain, I just wanted it to go away. And even my wife at the time, she was pregnant. I was just so far gone to the point where I wanted to end something that really God gave me two chances to be able to redeem myself, to get the healing. So that's why I started the healing process, because he gave me those chances. And then at the same time, I realized in those moments, I have a daughter, I have a wife, I now have a son, right? And who is going to be able to help them get through the struggles that is passed down to us from generations? I feel like trauma is passed down. So how can I make sure that I'm there and I'm mentally strong enough to be able to give them what they need? Well, I have to do work on myself first. I have to unpack all of these things within myself first. And so that's why I started my healing journey. And man, I still in therapy now. I still do work on myself now because this is truly a journey for anybody out there listening. It is truly a journey, and you have to be willing to go on the journey process with your own mental healer.
Marcus, thank you very much. Congratulations on your son. That is so
Appreciate
cool. And, yeah, man, that's fantastic. So big sister has a little brother to pick on now. So yeah. So let's talk about self-care just for a second. How did you reach out for, because you're telling your coaches, which we all do with guys, hey, I'm good. You tell friends, hey, I'm good, knowing that inside you're not good. When you realize I got to get some help, how did you do that? How did you realize, and what was that thing you did?
Well, so when I basically was on a tipping point, right? And so I was driving, right? And then if you could imagine me, driving, but at the time, the first call was my wife, right? Because she calls me before before I go to every practice, right? So I'm rushing her to get off the phone because I'm like, man, I'm tired of feeling this way, right? So after that, her mom calls me. So my mother-in-law calls me, and that's when I realized, like, once I was clear and I was safe, that's when I actually realized, okay, like, this is not normal. Like, I need help bad, right? So I walked into the Seattle Seahawks facility where my D-line coach, Pete Carroll, was there, and then also the training staff was there. I walked in and I said to the trainer, look, I need help. I can't do football right now. I just need help. And we all sat in the meeting room, and I honestly, and this is probably a lot of guys because they don't, that's not the first thing that they actually go do, but they pointed me into directions of therapists, and actually therapists that work, like that are part of the team, that wasn't like in the organization, but was outside of the organization, because, a lot of guys kind of like get this feeling of like, I don't know if I want to go in there because, they're a part of the organization, but they pointed me to someone outside of the organization. And I went there and I really got to start to unpack my feelings. And I was blaming everything on football at first, but it was really everything that I had been dealing with. And that's what I got to see. Once I actually spoke out of my mouth and I was vulnerable enough to say, hey, like, I need help. And then also my teammates after that, man, when I walked away, like, they started opening up to me and started telling me, like, hey, man, I was dealing with that like 2 weeks ago. I was dealing with that 3 weeks ago. And, these are people that, are still playing to this day, and that's how I knew that, what I did and what I do, it really helps people.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and it's going to help so many more. So I want to ask you the same question. Would you share with the audience a little bit more about the unique challenges that the athletes can find themselves tackling in this profession, and when you first realized you were struggling, and how you eventually found support for your mental health? And Zach, we'll come to you with the same question after Soul, and take us where we need to go in terms of understanding this, Soul.
Understood. And so I think when Marcus and I were talking earlier about, we've all been taught, in no matter what sport you playing growing up, that the game is 90% mental and 10% physical. And if that is true, how much are we investing into this 90%? And how much are we investing into this 10%? And it wasn't until after I retired that I realized that I spent my whole career from 6 to 26 doing the inverse. Like what Marcus said, doing it backwards. I invested 90% of my energy and effort into the physical part of the game and 10% into the mental part of the game. Didn't really know anything what that looked like. Didn't have the tools, didn't have the resources, And so when I got to my version of rock bottom mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. I was at my most vulnerable state as a black man in this country because I was on crutches and I just had neck surgery, so I couldn't turn my neck. I for the first time, I really couldn't even like defend myself like in public. So even like after I get off crutches, even after a couple of weeks after having neck surgery, now I'm just still walking around on the street or in the store or whatever. Nobody knows that I just had it. So, I remember one time I got pulled over by the cops and I was in the Uber. I was doing a responsible thing. And I remember I was thinking to myself, they will not hold back on me. And they don't know that I had neck surgery. They don't know that I had hip surgery. I can't defend myself even if I wanted to. My life flashed before my eyes in that moment. That was one of the scariest times of my life because I was because of everything I went through, just being an athlete and sacrificing my physical body. And then and I hit my version of rock bottom. I didn't know how to communicate my feelings. I didn't know, I kept everything in. That was and it was eating me alive and building up, this toxic energy, traumatic experience for me that I'm just holding on to. I didn't know who to express it to. I was too much of a macho man to feel like I could go talk to a therapist at the time. Nah, that's not cool. Like, I'm not about to do that. I just wasn't open-minded at that time, but it got so bad that I realized, I said, bro, everything else, you tried everything else, you down bad right now. You down bad right now and you got to surrender. And in that moment, as a believer, I realized that God was getting my undivided attention. He needed to sit me down and remove all distractions to get my undivided attention so I could actually listen to what he was getting ready to tell me and guiding me to where I am now. I didn't see what he saw then, but he knew that he needed me to be here right now for this conversation. I couldn't see that, right? I was so stuck in that moment and why me and asking all those questions. And then I made that decision. I said, I'm gonna fight back mentally. I'm gonna fight back. Yeah, I'm getting knocked down, but I'm definitely capable. I have the strength, God on my side, that I can fight back. And I started taking things into my own hands, reaching out to people. Finally got a therapist at the end of 2019. One of the best decisions. Tapped into mindfulness, as I spoke about earlier. Meditation really changed the game for me. Being able to be still with myself and just practice breathing techniques to help calm my anxiety. That's changed the game for me. And then I realized that there was a lack of representation of people who were facilitating things like meditation, things like breath work. These are all practical tools. And I just said, man, where is the representation? Where is that relatability for me to actually lean into this? It's already uncomfortable. So I at least want to feel some comfort in who I'm being guided by, and then that was also a struggle. So I took that, I answered that call, picked up that, and I said, this is going to be that identity shift for me. This is going to be that rebrand for me that I can now go out and serve using the platform of the NFL and using my purpose now, my voice and my gift to help heal others and providing these mental health tools.
This is fantastic. I hope that the men that are listening to this and for those others that are on here, get this to your man. This is an important podcast. These gentlemen are vessels in their vehicles, and they're here to help. So if there's a man in your life and he's not listening to this podcast, get it to him. He needs to hear this. These guys have an incredible wisdom and insight. I want to get to Zach, and thank you. So, and by the way, my neck is fused C5, C6, and I know what it means when you have to turn like this and turn like this, and people don't know. So thank you for sharing that and that experience being in that Uber, because that's an important piece of this conversation in terms of trauma and anxiety in terms of our lives. So Zach, would you share with the audience about the unique challenges that you find yourself tackling in this. You found yourself tackling in this profession. You play defensive end at a very high level, and we have a linebacker. And we have a wide receiver, and you guys were playing on at the top of your game. What were some of the unique challenges that you had to tackle, and when did you first realize that you were navigating and struggling with some things, and how did you eventually decide to find support?
Well, that's a great question. So I say for the most part of my career, I pretty much struggled with proving myself always. I started playing football at a very late age. Some people start when they're younger, kids, Pop Warner. I started when I was 15 in high school. So by me being so late, everybody else primarily kind of played it before. I always struggled to like catch up and try to prove myself. And that really carried over throughout, high school, college. I went to a very small private Division II school that no one ever heard of, Concordia St. Paul in Minnesota. So that within itself, I really had to overprove myself to have the opportunity to play in front of, NFL scouts, proving myself. They always had that knock on me like, yeah, you're a good player, but you're playing against low level competition. Not knowing that, great players come from, D2, D1, D3, they're great players everywhere. But I always had that knock on me from playing low level competition, as they call it. And even when I got to the NFL, I had to continuously prove myself. Reason being is because I didn't have, and that's one thing I noticed in the NFL as far as the business side. In my mind going into it, I'm thinking, football is strictly about being competitive. You put your best foot forward, you perform at a high level, and you will earn a spot on a team. Well, that was the case my first year in New England because that's how they ran the organization. Bill Belichick, he didn't really have any favorites. He was going to keep the best, 53-man roster. And I was able to, actually have a fair chance, compete, and earn a spot on that roster. Now, when I get to the other teams that I've been on in the NFL, that's when I kind of got to see, okay, this team has their guys, or, you may perform better than this guy, but because they have this special type of relationship, albeit, they may be in the same fraternity, or this coach may have coached this guy when he was in college, or this player, dad or uncle, played on this organization long ago. Those are some of the challenges that I had to face and that I was really struggling with. And, by me experiencing that, it really was a detriment to my self-worth. I felt like everything that I was doing, to the best of my ability, I never missed a practice. I never missed a game. If I was active for it, I've always stuck with that mindset as the best ability is availability. And I always wanted to be available. And so there were times where, I would grind super hard. I'm talking about playing positions that I normally didn't play just to have that opportunity to, get on the team. And that would be mitigated by, personal relationships with other players and coaches. And that would always used to mess with me. I always found myself in a repeated cycle every year after training camp with, being good, but not good enough, not cracking, the 53-man roster, being on practice squad, eventually earning my way onto a 53-man roster, but always having to prove myself in that aspect. And I feel like, those relationships, that was a tough hill to fight against. I'm coming out of a Division II school that, like I said, no one ever heard of. So I got to do extra to prove myself. And, for a long part after that, upon retirement, I went through a very bad identity crisis. And I'm pretty sure, Soul Code, Marcus, they can attest to this. Like, that thought of what is to come after everything is over is one of the most like to me, it was one of the most scariest feelings. Like, here I am, 30 years old, retired from the NFL. I went through anxiety, depression, PTSD, chronic pain syndrome. Much like Soul Code, I have permanent spine damage in my lumbar spondylolisthesis. So my L4 and L5 is really messed up. Every day I wake up with back pain, neck pain, all of these things. And so, upon retiring, I had to figure out what would the next, 40, 50 years of my life would look like. And I say for, most players, not just in football, but across all sports, we don't have an idea what that looks like. So, going through identity crisis, I really had to look at what other tools do I have under my belt to help me progress through my next phase of life. And, I've always liked kind of like, working out, doing, gym workouts and stuff, but I hadn't really like thought of it as a business. But I like doing it as a hobby. And I knew that my mental health was suffering post retirement is when, when you have hobbies that you enjoy, but they no longer become enjoyable. And, with that coupled with, how I was feeling on the inside, working out was no longer fun to me. Even as horrible as it sounds, like being with my kids, that wasn't enjoyable for me. And that's when I knew, like, okay, like, yeah, something's up. Like mentally, I've never been in this space before where, I find no enjoyment in doing the things that I used to enjoy. So I went to a mental health facility back in 2021. And there was some good things about it, really good positive things, but I don't think that I got the full benefit of being there because while I was there, I was still dealing with, things going on back home. So I wasn't able to fully, receive all the help that I needed. And when I got discharged, I kind of went back into, my old ways of, not working out, not having a real good relationship with my kids, friends, family, not finding things enjoyable that I like to do. And that led me to, a severe weight gain. Now, usually I'm playing at 273, low 270s, but I had got up to like 320 pounds. And that's the heaviest I've ever been in my life. And I know now that I know the link between obesity and mental health and physical health, I really had to correct that situation. And I'm glad I did because the last week of December 2021, I had to really look at myself and challenge myself. Okay, what do you want the next years of your life to look like? And, people often say, physical and mental health starts like in the gym or in the kitchen. That's not the case. I believe it's all a choice. Like you have to want to do it. You have to make that choice to get on the right track. And that's what I did over I think the next 3 or 4 months. I really dedicated to learning myself mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. I was able to lose that weight. And in doing that, I went back to school, became a certified ISSA personal trainer, nutritionist, and I created an online platform to help, not just community people, but, former players like myself, Brandon, Marcus, guys that are going through, physical and mental health issues, because a large part of that, and I believe that there's a direct correlation. You can't have physical health without mental health and vice versa. So I help guys in that position become better, get a better hold on their physical and mental health. And I'm glad I'm in this space because, yeah, the NFL, they'll give us little resources like maybe like a gym membership to the YMCA or something like that. But it's not, I don't feel like they have a platform to help those men, like retired guys, transition out of football, but still take care of their mental health. Because what happens most of the time is that, guys are retired and they'll get severely out of shape, overweight. They don't take care of their mental health because they don't want to really work out because they've done it for so long as a part of football. Well, I created a platform to help that area, but it's not football training. It's more of a lifelong lifestyle commitment to bettering your physical and mental health. So, so I say the biggest part of my struggles was, that identity crisis, transitioning after football, and, really trying to, find the courage to seek help because, I'm from Southside Chicago and I've carried a lot of trauma with me throughout my whole life. And, in Southside, you don't really get the opportunity. You don't have the resources for therapists. You don't have the resources to talk to people. And the environment I grew up in, it was kind of like you have to be tough. You can't show no weakness, otherwise you get preyed on. Like I grew up in a very dangerous neighborhood, and if you wasn't tough, then you get stomped on, you get rolled over, you get talked about, you get bullied, all of that things. And I've experienced bullying because I was a different kid. I was taller than everyone. I was always taller than everyone. I did different things. I wasn't in the streets. I liked watching anime and stuff like that. I would get talked about, picked on. So, which is just fine, but I remember my principal told me, dare to be different. And I just kind of stuck with that my whole life. And I've been different my whole life. So it took a while for me to try to break that stigma of not reaching out, not talking to anybody, not seeking help because of that stigma and trauma I was carrying from the environment that I grew up in. So I'm glad I was able to break free of that, and I'm able to live more freely now.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Zach. And I wanted to share something with you all in the audience. You talked about weight gain and the toll there. We have a program called Hearts and Minds. Mental health is physical health, to what you just said. And this is really helping NAMI Hearts and Minds is actually looking at the physical and how it really impacts the mental. So I appreciate you sharing that. And Marcus, as you kicked us off in this conversation, we always do things in reverse. And, the World Health Organization says there is no physical health without mental health, to what Zach just said. And then, so you said, it's interesting. I never thought about it. The whole time the coaches are telling you, all right, now this game is 90% mental and it's 10% physical. But what you work on the whole time is repetition and reinforcement of the physical. Run this route, stand in this spot on the line. Make sure if you're the outside linebacker, you hear this and repetition, reinforcement. But you're repeating and reinforcing the physical and leaving the mental out. So I just can't believe this conversation in terms of what you've shared. And Marcus, what you shared earlier about work on myself and self-care. That's one of the things we know every time we fly. What do they tell us? Before you put someone else's mask on, put your own mask on. And we as a society really have to work at this. And you guys are stewards. You're vessels to help evolve this. I spent 21 years in a career, and I woke up one day when I made that change and made that decision on my own. And I said, wait a minute. I gave so much to that. It became who I was. I had lost me. It wasn't any longer what I did. It became who I was. And I had to go through a metamorphosis to say, well, who am I? Because it had become everything. My family, everything was connected to that 21 years in terms of everyone I knew, everything I did, all of my socialization was through that group. And all of a sudden there's this vacuum. So I can relate in a different way, and not nearly from the physical standpoint of what you gentlemen have navigated and what you have done. So, kudos to you in terms of where you are and the decisions that you've made. I want to bring up another topic because as we know, February is Black History Month. And on top of being athletes, you're also Black men. And on top of mental health being stigmatized in the athletic community, it also been historically stigmatized for men to talk about it. And it's also historically not talked about much in Black communities. I know my dad and my uncles will all shake it off. Oh, you okay? That boy over there, he's all right. Leave him alone. But in fact, we are actually starting a Black male mental health initiative this year to address this, in addition to the work we've been doing at HBCUs and with our other cross-cultural innovation and engagement work. So that's the setup. What I want to ask you is, do you feel like there were any extra barriers, either internal or external, to talking about your mental health, not just as athletes, but as men and as Black men? And then how do you think we can help change that narrative and the culture to continue making space for our people in our community to open up about their mental health?
I'll go ahead and start off. So yeah, that was a big barrier. At least for me, it was. And like I said, this goes back to the environment I grew up in. It was a very hostile environment. And if you were seen as vulnerable, you were seen as weak. So I was taught to hold a lot of stuff in, and I see that not just in myself, but the people I grew up around. Like, all of us are in this hostile environment, holding all this tension, all this frustration, all this anger and pain and sadness. And what happened was a lot of the bullying and stuff came from that displaced anger. These kids that coming from broken homes, don't have a dad or don't have a mom, or under these circumstances that, they're taking all this anger and bringing it to school and putting it on other kids who are probably going through the similar things. So, have this repeated cycle of just violence and anger and frustration and, mental health issues. And we don't have the resources, especially as kids growing up in the late 90s, to really speak up about it. And like I said, if you were seen or heard even, trying to be vulnerable and talk about these things, you were seen as weak. So carrying that throughout your whole life, that can be pretty detrimental. But, you have to get to the space especially as a black man, where you're okay with being vulnerable. And that's, that's why I tip my hat to, like, guys like myself, Marcus, Soul Cole, and all the rest of us black men that are being open, that are being, that are challenging ourselves to make a change and to redirect the conversation to, being more open and expressing your feelings. And, maybe that any piece of advice or anything you have to say can reach someone's ears and be like, okay, I see these guys are doing it. They're former professional players. What excuse do I have? And that's a big thing as well. They don't really see us athletes talking about these things, because I guarantee like 80 to 90, probably about 70 to 80% of athletes are going through some type of mental health struggle. I tell people this all the time. No matter how much money you make, what your status in society, you are not immune to what life can throw at you. Like, nobody is immune to that. Okay, if you're rich, poor, middle class, white, black, Asian, whatever, you're not immune to life. And that's where you see, cases of these millionaires and billionaires ended up killing themselves. But then you ask yourself, how can a person with that much money and access kill themselves? Like, it's way deeper than what people think. But especially as black men, seeing as how we often get the short end of the stick in society, it's more imperative for us to, come together, speak about these things so we can build a better society of black men.
Thank you, Zach. Do you feel, thank you very much. Do you feel like there were any extra barriers, either internal or external, to talking about your mental health, not just as an athlete, but as a man and as a black man?
I was told when I was younger, and I'm pretty sure you gentlemen were told the same thing, that when we leave that house, we got 2 strikes against us already. We're men and we're black men. So we had those 2 strikes against us already out the gate. And that already put your guard up. And you now have to figure out how to navigate and walk on eggshells not to get that 3rd strike. And that's, we not always taught how to go about navigating that in a way that's healthy. We were always taught in a way that's toxic, that's internalizing all the stuff that we going through out in that world and not being able to express it in a healthy way, right? I didn't know, it was cool to journal my emotions. I didn't know, that like just how to, a safe space. We didn't have safe spaces, right? The only safe space that we had was a barbershop. Now, don't get me wrong. That played a huge part in the black male community. That was therapy. That was therapy. Hence why LeBron and Mav Carter created the shop. Now, like, that's a safe space, because that's a part of our culture. And one of the things that I had to unlearn was vulnerability. I looked at vulnerability as a liability. And it took maturity to understand that vulnerability, appropriate vulnerability, is an asset. And what do I mean when I say that? This safe space that NAMI has created for us to have this dialogue of black men is an appropriate space for me to be vulnerable and share my story, my authentic story, for so many people to hear that I can't quantify the impact. But I had to be comfortable, and that takes courage. That takes you being sure of yourself to be able to have that conversation and not be fearful or not be worried that someone might judge you based off me just saying I cried yesterday. As a black man, I'm comfortable saying that. And that's a part of, breaking that stigma. And that's a part of our responsibility with the platform that we have to be vulnerable in appropriate situations, and understanding that vulnerability is not a liability. It is an asset.
Wow. So thank you so much. And, vulnerability is not a liability. It's actually a strength. And you guys are bench pressing 350 right now, and you're squatting 600. You guys are beast. And I'm just saying that because, as you said, getting that safe space, and this is also about trust. You got to have an inner circle of people that you trust and you can pick up the phone. Excuse me, I'm dating myself. You go to your technology and you reach out to a buddy and you punch in a number and say, hey, I just need to rap. And somebody you trust that you can say, I was really down yesterday and I cried. There's also this thing of trust, and we do try to create. NAMI tries to create that safe space, and we try to create judgment-free zones. We don't pass judgment. We meet you where you are. So, Marcus, I want to come to you with this as well, from the standpoint of the question. Do you feel like there were have been any extra barriers, either internal or external, to talking about your mental health, not just as an athlete, but as a black man, as a man, and then as a black man?
I would definitely say, yeah, just because we have to look at society. What does society actually say to us as far as being a man first, but also being a black man? If you look at households, how many households where you have young men growing up without a father? So that's a barrier right there in itself of men not having an actual father in the house. And then after that, who do they turn to, right? They don't turn to their mother, right? Because they're actually searching from emotional stability that you can't necessarily get from a woman, right? They may meet somebody in the streets. They may meet somebody who is that natural force, right? And it may be the wrong force, right? So now they're learning from someone who maybe not even know who they are themselves. So I just feel like the one of the barriers is the father actually being in the home to actually navigate and help the son with their emotions. Because oftentimes when my parents got divorced, right, my father and my mother were always in my life, but my father had an issue with showing his emotions, i.e. what you said. You guys' generation, it was, you got to keep going. You didn't have time to actually process your emotions because you always had to work 2 times harder than your counterpart. And that's the kind of thing that I took on and I take on, because that barrier alone, it's hard to. I was just talking to my dad the other day, and I'm like, hey man, Dad, it's time to start opening up. You know what he said? He was like, nah, I ain't ready yet. I ain't ready yet. So I think the barrier of having a father in the home, but then also, just us as men in general, like we have to see whether you're black, white, German, Irish, whatever ethnicity you are, we have to see a man speak about his feelings and his emotions. And then that makes us comfortable enough as men to be able to do the same things. So, that for me, that's what would be, the barrier, the male figure in the home, because sometimes it's hard. It's truly hard for a son or a young man to try to find that emotion. And a lot of times, and, they find it somewhere else where it's not really conducive to their life.
Yeah, it's so well put. In my generation, I remember my dad. I was fortunate enough to have him in the house, but we never saw him during the week because he worked 2 jobs. We only saw him on the weekends. So mom and grandma did a lot of raising, because his moniker is that I got to bring in the money to make sure you guys have a roof over your head. So and I've repeated some of that in terms of long hours and that kind of thing, because you repeat that what you see. So we've got to change this. So with that said, let me ask you guys about, how do you think we can all work to change the culture to continue making space for other people in our community to open up about their mental health like we are right here?
To be honest, I think what we're doing right now is we're normalizing it. Over the last few years, the conversation about mental health is starting to skyrocket. And now with the conversation, it's starting to become normal, right? Before it was 5-10 years ago. And so I think I want to, give us all credit that we're, taking that initiative and holding that space now to normalize this conversation. I also believe, And the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing is I believe that if we can make, mental health, mindfulness, we can make that cool in our demographic. If we knew that it was actually cool, just like how we think hip hop is cool, just how we think fashion is cool, just how we think the latest gadget is cool, and we embody that and we go out here and embrace that in our culture, I think that's a shift mentally that can start to change the direction that we move on with this next generation that's coming after us. I think, because once we embody that and, it's cool to meditate. It's cool. And that's exactly me showing up in my authentic self in the way that I do as a facilitator in that whole space. And I just want people to see it. That brother look cool while he's doing this thing. Now I'm open-minded. Now I'm curious. And now I'll go explore for myself.
You know what? That's so right. How do we make it cool? How do we do that? So, Marcus, Zach, what do you? Thank you. So, what do we do to change the culture to continue to make this space for other people in our community to open up about their mental health? What do you guys think?
Man, that's a great question. For a long time we've had, there were resources there, right? Now, if we looked at them or tried to search them out, I don't think none of us really did that, or just people in general, because it wasn't something that, people was talking about. But I think, like Soul Cole said, like what we doing now, and then just being a voice, right? You putting a voice to the resources. You're putting a voice to what we call, the Avengers. Soul Cole came up with that, right? We see ourselves as superheroes, right, in our different rights. Right, with everything that we do, what do we do best? And for me, being a life coach and actually trying to build this bridge to push people to, being more so in the weight room, doing more meditation, going to therapy, doing those things, pushing people to do that, I think really helps out a lot. And you have a voice behind all of those resources now. So I think the fact that more and more people are talking about it now, right? People can actually see and hear, okay, these people are talking about it. This must be actually serious, because, even though we may be football players, we're human first, right? And people are actually now starting to see the human side of us and see us take our helmet off and actually be the people that we already were in the first place. And so that's, what this doing, like Soul Cole said, creating that safe space. This is what is going to continue to help people talk about it. The more that we talk about it, the more we drive it home and continue to speak about how healing is a part of your everyday process. This is a part of your journey that is going to carry you, till you're not here anymore. And so, that's what I would say about that.
Well, thank you for that. And you guys are the Avengers. So I'm glad that's the title for you. Zach, any thoughts on how we evolve the culture?
Yeah, man, we just got to keep having a dialogue. The more we continue to have these conversations, the more we continue to showcase our vulnerability, our experiences. You never know what somebody else is going through that can relate. And that's how, we keep adding a link on to the chain. We express these things, and viewers out there be like, okay, I can relate to that. That's familiar with me. Hey, let me try to reach out with these guys, or try to implement some of the tools and the techniques that they've been discussing. So that's really how we can further these issues that we're facing in today's society. Just keep the dialogue going, and that's why I commend all of us for being vulnerable and having this safe space to really let out what's on our mind, just so we can, reach at least one person. That's all it takes, one person. And then that snowball affects into, a whole group of people. And then, we're able to, like Soul Cole said, normalize it.
Yeah, this is fantastic, and we need to do that, and we need to make it cool. So thank you for that. And then and so you mentioned the barbershop, and we had a relationship with an organization called the Confess Project, and that was started by a gentleman out of Little Rock, Arkansas, and it was what he noticed in his navigating his own mental health from the standpoint of what happens in that safe space called the barbershop. And that's so interesting because if we can create more safe spaces, because some of those conversations at barbershop become cool in terms of the approach, in terms of the language, and in terms of the trust. Before we go to our last question, I want to bring up a survey that the NCAA did last year. According to their survey, less than half of student athletes said they would feel comfortable seeking support from a mental health provider on campus. And last year, we saw far too many student athletes lose their lives to suicide in the news, including a young woman named Arlana Miller from my alma mater, Southern University. She was a cheerleader, but she lost her life to suicide. What advice do you have for young athletes when it comes to taking care of their mental health? And what advice do you have for all of us in how we can play a role in helping prevent any more tragic losses of our young student athletes?
This may be, easier said than done, but you have to really pay attention to the signs. Signs of, mental struggles, depression, anxiety, they will be there, and you may not know or pinpoint where it's coming from or what that looks like. But once you sense something is off, my recommendation is that you immediately take action, because if you don't, what happens is, you'll build up. That tends to build up, and the more it builds up, and the more you're not finding outlets to either talk about it or have something that can temporarily take your mind off of it, that's when you can become a danger to yourself and or others around you. So my recommendation is really pay attention to the signs of declining mental health, anxiety and depression, what that looks like and what you think that looks like. And if the resources are available to you to reach out to someone and talk about it, I would strongly encourage you to do that. Especially, I wish I had that growing up. So my definitely words of encouragement to, young listeners and young athletes out there is recognize the signs. Do not be afraid to get help. You don't have to suffer in silence. You are not alone. And there are resources that you can use and you should use to try to mitigate those struggles.
Yeah, for me, definitely, if, young athletes or anybody who's listening, you definitely don't have to suffer in silence. This is a platform that we want to continue to tell you that you are, more than an athlete. Your mind, body, and soul is important to all of us. And, I just truly believe that even if there's a situation that comes up, I want to talk to the people that are on the other end of it, who the moms, the fathers. I had a mom one time, she just asking me questions on, her son and just trying to figure out her son better. Obviously, we talked about the father not being in the house. So I had to be a person of a voice in that moment. And, for moms and dads, like, just instead of speaking so early, just listen. Right. No matter what the situation may be, just listen and hear them out, because, they may be battling something internally that, we don't even understand. Right. It could be something at school. It could be, it could be anything. And so, I would just always give the encouragement to listen, because, I feel like when a child feels like he isn't heard, then they stop speaking. And then as the time they stop speaking, they start masking all their emotion and feelings because they feel like people don't understand them and don't get them. And then we all know what that leads to. We all know that anxiety leads to depression. Then later on, feeling like you have no self-worth, no value with this world. So I will always say, hey, man, speak, free yourself. Remember that what you're holding on to is in the back of your brain right now. It hasn't moved to the front of your brain because you haven't decided to release it out of your mouth. And if you decide to release it out of your mouth, you will be free and you will feel so much better.
There you go. Thank you. So wrap us up on this one, and then I got a closing question for you guys.
Yeah, that boy charged me up right there. I want to echo everything my brothers have said. Definitely don't have to suffer in silence. You know that, definitely. And then everybody who was supporting you, understanding that, yeah, what Marcus said, listen first and don't listen to respond. Listen to the things that aren't being said. Listen to the body language. Listen to the things that come up in the way they listen to the things that aren't being said, right? So don't listen to just respond and already have that, question or statement back that because you're not really truly listening to them. And then for those young kids or athletes or whomever this is for, Marcus touched on this. When you begin to speak, there's power in the tongue, life and death. And when you begin to speak life, when you choose life for yourself, you begin to affirm yourself. That's something that changed the game for me. When I started to affirm myself that I was worthy, that I love myself, and something as simple as that has so much power when you actually know it. Not just believe it, when you know it in your spirit, and when you know it deep down in your soul, that will start to change that'll start to change your energy level. And you have to just trust it. From personal experience, I remember being in college and being asked if, do I want to go speak to a sports psychiatrist? And I said, no, quite frankly, hell no. To go talk to a white man who never played the sport before, I'll figure this out on my own. I was so closed-minded. I was so naive. My ego was so strong. My pride didn't want to be hurt. I had to put that to the side. Trust me, I've been there, and I know you battling with that right now. And so I'm saying it's okay. You don't have to carry all that weight on yourself.
Wow.
Just know that you are supported.
This is incredible. We say mental health is just as important as physical health. We say make time for things you value outside of your support. Find your support system. And it's okay to not be okay. Don't worry about peer pressure. That's another thing we got to look at for young people, especially is, first of all, having them actually understand what peer pressure is, keeping up with the Joneses, this kind of thing, and their self-worth, making sure they have their own self-worth. But this is incredible, and I really hope that the NCAA hears what you're saying. I actually hope that the commissioner of the NFL watches and hears this podcast. So I want to come to the last question, but I want to tell you that for me, quite frankly, this is a Super Bowl of mental health right here with you three gentlemen. This is a Super Bowl of mental health. So as I say that, I want to tell you that as we're playing the Super Bowl of mental health, this is your word, this is your life, and I want to give you the audience to really speak to it. The world can be a difficult place, and sometimes it can be hard to hold on to hope. That's why each week we dedicate the last couple of minutes of our podcast to a special section called Hold On to Hope. Zach, what has you hold on to hope?
Well, for me personally, I've been tuning more into my spiritual and emotional health. And by that, I'm having more talks with my creator. And this is something that I learned from a therapist. And, having these talks with my creator, waking up in the morning, giving myself at least 5 or 10 minutes to really have that conversation with the one above all, and having these positive affirmations with myself, like Soul Cole said, like speaking life within myself, knowing to my core of who I am, what I believe in, and what my purpose is on this earth, gives me the spark I need to become the best version of myself. So, implementing those techniques as consistently as I can really propels me to become, like I said, to become the best version of myself. And that version of myself is what is going to continue to spark change in my community, as far as a Black man, being a influencer on, younger athletes and the Black youth. And so by me continuing to do that, I believe that's what'll help, further, these conversations help me be more expressive and to allow younger people and, anyone who's listening to become their best version of themselves?
Marcus, what helps you? What helps you hold on to hope?
Man, first and foremost, my belief in, my Lord and Savior, that gets me holding on to hope. But then also with the belief that I have, God always puts people in your life to help you continue to mold, right? And I just think that was be able to go on a journey with therapy, and then also learning in therapy my emotions and being able to tap into what actual emotion I'm feeling, because every day is not the same. Every day you are better than others. So one of the things, well, I'm gonna say two of the things. Well, one is the feelings wheel, right? That I learned in therapy. I'm sure a lot of therapists know about this. They bring up the feelings wheel, in which they have these different feelings where you can articulate your feelings better. So if I wake up and I'm not feeling so hot, I can look at this and I can go over, okay, what am I feeling? And then after that, I can go into the mirror and I can talk to myself positive, in a positive way, like Soul Cole said. And I tell myself, I'm great. I'm more than a conqueror. I am who I say I am. And I am going to help anybody who is in need, but also I'm going to put my mind, my body, and my soul first, so I can be everything that I could be for somebody else. And so that was the first thing with with the feelings wheel, but then also the positive self-talk. So that's how I keep hope. I always think about the Creator, like Zach Moore said, my Lord and Savior. And then through therapy, I've learned these different tricks that could kind of like help me stay zen, if you will, because you don't want to be too high, you don't want to be too low. You want to be, right in the middle. And so that's what keeps my hope alive, because I see that process in the journey. And it's like Kobe said, man, you really have to fall in love with the process, because that's what makes you. What makes you who you are. So that's what I would say.
You have to fall in love with the process. Thank you. That everything you said, but that last thing, you have to fall in love with the process. And as we think about athletes, they understand process. So what are your thoughts on what helps you hold on to hope?
I'm going to get to that. I don't want this moment to pass, because I'm feeling this energy as I'm listening, and just being present. And I'm just grateful for this conversation. This is a powerful conversation that is impacting, and I am expressing the utmost gratitude for being a part of this. I am truly honored. What allows me to hold on to hope, Marcus and Zach touched on it. Our Creator, the Almighty Most High, has given each and every one of us breath in our lungs. Something so small we take for granted each and every day. When I wake up and I feel that life force energy flowing through my body, I know that I have hope. I have hope in that I am still here for a reason. I'm still here for a reason. I have breath in my lungs, and that breath gives me everything I need to go out and get my feet on the ground, to go out and stand and look in the mirror and say, I am who I say I am. I love that, Marcus. And to go out and be encouraged in the midst of the suffering that I'm experiencing, because we don't live a life without suffering. No one listening to this podcast has lived a life without suffering. And we all must embrace that. We all must endure that. We all must persevere and overcome, because you have that in you. We all have it in us to overcome the suffering that we have experienced. And I'm holding on to what I've already overcame, what I've already been tested with. That's the only reason I have a testimony, is because I've been tested. And I'm holding on to that hope in the breath of my lungs, to be able to speak and communicate with intention every word that I speak.
That's incredible, and we got to keep going with this. Zach, did you have something you wanted to say, or Marcus? Because I do want to ask you something else. How can someone feel hopeful when everything feels so hopeless?
I say a big component of that is, to me, is finding purpose. When you know what your purpose is, when you have an objective to get to or something to, strive for, that creates that hope. Because I feel like everybody was put on this earth with a purpose. Everyone has a talent or a skill or something that they're very passionate about and love to do. Now it may take some time and configuration on what that looks like and how to, go about executing that. But for me, this goes back to, the identity crisis and me, losing hope as to what, the next phase of my life would look like. And when I found my purpose and I really honed in on that, that gave me hope. That spoke life and energy into me, and to, be a person now that's becoming the change that I want to see in my society and in the world, and with people that I come in contact with and have conversations with. That furthers my hope. So I'll say a big component to finding hope when you feel hopelessness is understanding that you have a purpose, and you have to put the work in to find that purpose. And once you understand what that looks like, create that plan on how to execute it.
That was dope,
man. So that's great.
Dang, Zach.
Yeah, that was dope. Thank you, Zach.
My God.
Marcus or Soul, anything you wanted to offer there, or anything you want to share? Remember, this is our Super Bowl. I'm labeling it our Super Bowl of mental health right here. So anything you want to share, please.
Yeah, when you feel so much hopelessness, there is a point where you do feel low. You feel like there's nothing you could do to get out of that. But what I would say to help you get out of that, and people have heard me say this before, is, success is not a destination. It's a mindset. And so we have to understand that where we are right now, what we're doing, no matter what, we are successful. We have to truly believe that, right? Because what society says about us, and society likes to put these things on us, like, I played 6 years in the league. So Cole, I think you played 5 or 4 years, and you got Zach, you played 6 too, right? But society will say, "Oh, you didn't play 10 years, like you're not accomplished," right? And then with people who are going throughout their lives and doing, what they believe is their purpose, you got to know that, your success is tied to your journey, and true success is the pain, the struggle, the things that you endure along the way to get to your soul destiny. That is true success, right? Nobody ever wants to really talk about the stuff that you have to go through in order to get where you are. And so if we change our mindset to wrap our minds around that, we can then follow the process and know that the hopelessness that you feel right now is only temporary. It's temporary, and that you can solely come out of that by hearing us speak about it. And I'm hoping today that, man, we could give you life.
You are. So what would you like to share?
Love it, fellas. I love it, fellas. When you feeling hopeless, I want to encourage you with this one word. This is my word for the year, and it's light. When all feels dark, and you look around and everything is just closed in on you, you have nowhere to turn, that's where you turn in. That's where you turn in and see the light within you, and know that that light may be so small, you might just barely see it, but there is hope, because there's a sparkle. There's that small piece of light inside of you deep down, but you gotta trust that it's there and it's waiting for you to go and meet it, greet it. That light waiting inside of you, that is the light of your Lord and Savior that is waiting for you to connect with it. And then once you connect with it, it's going to expand, because that's what light does. That's what light is. You are light. I'm reminding me you are light. And when you feel hopeless, turn in, tap into that light, and then you'll become hopeful.
So thank you, buddy. That tap into that light. Even in that smallest moment, tap into that light. You guys have shared so much incredible wisdom from let's make mental health cool to positive self-talk to you have to fall in love with the process. I am who I say I am. You cannot live a life without suffering to it's a journey, self-care, to find your talent and your skill. It's out there. Navigate through that identity crisis, find your purpose, to work on yourself. And also, I heard many times, it's a journey. Understand it's a journey. And also, I want to say this, don't let vulnerability be a liability. So I'm trying to summarize a lot of what you guys have shared because you are the Avengers and you're helping so many with this. And I hope this podcast goes so far and so wide, and that's why it's important that I summarize what you gentlemen have shared because you shared so much. And don't succumb to peer pressure from the standpoint of guess what? You were in the league. We don't look at the chronological number. Don't let society and the society of this discipline called the NFL dictate that you are less than because you were this versus that. You have played this sport at the highest level, and this is a lesson for society at large from the standpoint and young people at large. Don't let society dictate who you are and being able to pass judgment on more than or less than. You are and you will be. So I want to challenge everybody with that. One of you said that let's make mental health, and that was mental health cool. So I want to share something with you if I can get it to work real quick, because this is a part of making mental health cool. And young people keep this thing at the end of their hands, and this is another appendage. So I'm going to do something real quick and see if it does it on here. And I wanted to share this with the audience and with you guys. Siri, I'm feeling depressed.
I'm sorry to hear that. Talking to someone might help. If you'd like, I can help you call a friend or family member, or you can find help online at NAMI.org.
What do you guys think?
Wow.
Dope. Dope.
So we want this for our young people, and we want to have that. So that's on Siri.
That was that was cool.
Oh wow, I got goosebumps. That's powerful.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Thank you. So you guys are fantastic. I'm just blessed to get to meet you guys and to have this session with you. And I hope that we get to know each other because you guys are fantastic and you are the Avengers and you're helping so many. And we hope to work with you to help more. This has been Hope Starts With Us, a podcast by NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. If you are looking for mental health resources, you are not alone. To connect with the NAMI HelpLine and find local resources, visit nami.org/help, text HelpLine to 62640 or dial 800-950-NAMI-6264 or on Siri, say, I am feeling depressed, and NAMI resources will come up. Or if you are experiencing an immediate suicide, substance use, or mental health crisis, please call or text 988 to speak with a trained support specialist or visit 988lifeline.org. Thank you so much for participating in this podcast. Hope Starts With Us. We appreciate you so very much.